Welcome to Patty's Place, a place where we will talk about grief, dementia, and caregiving. I named the podcast Patty in honor of my mom, who died from dementia about 2 years ago. So I like to have this community so people know that they're not alone and they can go through these things and there's resources available. So grab your cup of tea, your cup of coffee, or if you've had a really bad day, a glass of wine, and we will get talking today. So today our guest is Jane Dye. She is an RN, a certified holistic health coach. You're also a mastery level transformational coach as well in intuitive intelligence, a methods coach,
Mhm.
and many other things. She also has a website as well. So, Jane, welcome to Patty's Place.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm so glad to be here. I think it's important, especially for your listeners, to know I'm also a certified grief educator.
Yes.
And that came after doing all this transition. I started my professional life as working in adult inpatient psychiatry and then transitioned to outpatient work as a director of nursing and medical training for a national healthcare company. And then I became that independent health coach practitioner that you mentioned. Um, but it was because I experienced the loss of many family and friends from early adulthood on. But it wasn't until experiencing the death of my middle son, Christopher, 3 years ago, that I saw how little people understood and rarely responded well to grief. And so, as you know, we live in a grief illiterate world where we avoid talking about and taking care of people experiencing loss. So that's why I chose to expand my practice to become a certified grief educator. I'm able to provide the highest level of grief support through education and experience and insights into what I'm sure you know is the often unacknowledged rocky terrain of grief. I am thrilled that I completed a certificate program designed by world-renowned grief expert David Kessler, where I bring his unique methodology, tools, um, and decades of experience to help people navigate the challenges of grief. So this has allowed me to turn my passion into purpose, helping those in grief find meaning after loss, and certainly as Christopher's legacy, just like Patty's Places to your mom. And I love that.
Yeah. Well, my mom was not only was she a caregiver, she was also somebody who loved to entertain and everything. So she would, people just came to her. So I was like, it's like you're coming into her house again.
I just love that. That's wonderful.
So you explained a little bit how you got where you are today and that. So what do you think is the importance of having guidance and support for life challenges, especially through grief?
Well, that's I believe because grief can be traumatic and transformative.
Mhm.
Loss changes everything about you and your life, your daily routine, your perspective, your future, along with your connections, right? To yourself, to others, and to the world. And our worst moments can be seeds for some of our best, as they do have an amazing power to transform us. So when we challenge the situation that is hopeless, usually with support and guidance, we are challenged to change ourselves. And when we do that, we can turn the tragedy into an occasion for growth. That being said, the growth will never seem worth it in many ways,
Mhm.
but it certainly can help you carry on um, with meaning. Um, I know for sure there is no need also to compare our losses when we recognize that in every case, your loss is the worst loss for you.
Definitely, and I do think that sometimes we fall into that, we compare or people compare us and they say, "Oh, well, you should be over it," or I did this or that," and sometimes you're just not ready. It may be as simple as cleaning out somebody's clothes, for some people, they have to
Right.
do it right away, and other people, it takes them a while, and they got through a box today, and they should be able to celebrate that that's what they did.
Right. So I think it's important to note, and you may have discussed this with your listening audience already, but grief is what's going on inside,
Mhm.
and mourning is what we do on the outside.
Okay.
So the internal work of grief is a process. Many people call it a journey, and it doesn't have prescribed dimensions. It doesn't end on a certain date, as you mentioned. So when people are mourning, we can't judge their grief based on whether they're crying
Mhm.
or they're angry or they're upset the most. I mean, some can never see your grief or judge your grief by what emotions you show or you don't show. So only you, as the griever, only know your grief, but the connection and attachment we feel for each other, to those we love, to our friends, family, our coworkers, even to the home we live in, the job we engage in, they'll be reflected by the pain we feel later when we no longer have our loved one, the relationship, or our home or the job. So we grieve for who and what we love, and even for who and what we hate, but we don't grieve for those we are indifferent to. So grief
Mm.
essentially is the evidence of your love and caring. Um, and that certainly is proved in the tears that you shed.
Oh, definitely. When you said, you know, everybody shows it differently, it made me think of the day of my mom's, well, a couple days before my mom's service, my dad never once asked me how I was getting to the service. He just
Mm,
now his brother came into town, and, his brother was like, "Oh, no, you're not driving yourself," telling my dad that. But neither one of them ever asked me how I was getting there.
mhm,
My mom's friends, her best friends and her sister, they were like, "How are you getting there?" And they're like, "No, you're not going by yourself." And they went with me.
mm.
And just a few months ago, my dad was like, "Well, you seemed okay. I knew you weren't, but you seemed okay." And I wanted to be like, "Well, that's not even the point. Like, you could have asked me like how I was." But I
Yeah, you brought up a great point. I mean, I think the thing in any relationship, but particularly in grief, is not to assume anything,
Mhm.
and that a simple invitation makes a huge difference in kind of seeing where people are at. I don't think it's necessarily helpful to say like, "Oh, how are you?"
Right.
Sometimes that's just a hello. But if you do say to somebody like, "How are you doing today in your grief?" Or, "Is there anything that I should know today that would be helpful to you?" Um, there are lots of ways to communicate that even when people are awkward and you look like you're fine, but for all you know it, you're just barely hanging on.
Exactly. I sometimes I still say it. I'm like, just because I'm dressed doesn't and showered doesn't mean I'm okay. Like today I was able to do
Exactly.
it,
Mhm.
with it.
Yeah.
And
I think it's really important to note. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
oh,
interrupt.
no, you're fine.
Uh,
Go ahead.
that we know that there's no timeline in grief
Mm-hmm.
and there's not a cure for grief because people in grief are not broken
Mm-hmm.
and we don't need to fix them. There's like no right or wrong way to grieve. However, we can explore patterns and interventions that help us through the dark days. And something that I learned from David Kessler that I feel is important to share with you and your audience is that our grief will not get smaller over time. We need to get bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that happens through connections. You need to feel to heal. And, so many times in grief, um, we don't have the normal or natural infrastructure surrounding us in the way people did in generations before. People live very far away from each other.
Mm-hmm.
They may not have really supportive relationships, but grief is a side effect of having connections, attachments, and relationships, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we often think we want to escape grief, but it seems what we really want to escape is the pain of loss.
Yeah. It
And sometimes that makes it hard for people to relate, It sounds like that might have been what you experienced?
Yeah. I mean, I also know my dad. So, I
Mm.
wasn't I on one hand I wasn't surprised, but on the other hand I was like, "Hello?" you know. But yeah,
Yeah.
I would agree. It's that pain of loss, and I always think like uh, I don't know if it was my mom or my grandma or somebody said like, when it first happens, it's just huge. You feel like this huge like hole in your heart or in your body. But as time goes on, it's not that time makes it better, but you kind of feel like the hole gets a little bit smaller. Like you said, it's because you have other support systems or different things that come in, so it's not as raw, But because grief has no timeline, there could be something, and all of a sudden it could be years later, months later, and you have like a grief burst because you hear a song or you see something and then you're like right there on that day. And that's okay.
Oh, it absolutely is. And I think that is so key for people to give themselves permission to know that that's going to happen, and that when it happens, it's just your attachment to love and the
Mhm.
missing whatever activates you to have that burst, as you said. It's okay. And I think, we're here to let other people know it's okay,
Yeah.
because there is so much judgment,
Mhm.
internally and externally, around grief and how people grieve and how long. I mean, I'm sure you've probably heard, aren't you over it yet?
Exactly. Yeah.
But David Kessler says, and I share, took this from him as well, is, well, how long is my person going to be dead?
Exactly.
Because
Yes.
that's
Yes.
how long I'm going to grieve. And
Yeah.
like you said, I'll get myself up in the morning, get going, have this great opportunity to speak with you on a podcast. But that doesn't mean that I don't think about those that I lost, and in particular, my son,
Mhm.
every day, that I don't miss him, that I don't wish that the circumstances were different. What I do know is that my story and my experience, how it transformed me, is that I am a more compassionate person. I am somebody who can hold more space. I mean, I think a lot of people are surprised at, like, the best thing you can do for somebody who's had a loss is to witness their grief,
Yes. Yes,
is to
definitely.
be there for them. Sometimes, they worry about what to say or not to say, and we could certainly go into that because there are some things that are more helpful than not.
True, yeah.
But but I think your willingness to sit in the discomfort
Mhm.
and not try to make people feel better about something that's really hard to feel better about. I mean, I think one of the things when I work with clients that's really important is that they understand that they get to stay in what we like to call the first generation's feelings. Like, if you're profoundly sad,
Mhm.
you get to be sad. You don't have to hop over to grief and cheering up and like, but this person died, but we had this many years together, whatever. You don't
Mhm.
need to go there. You
Exactly.
don't need to go there unless it so interrupts your life that you are not able to respond to any of the things that normally would constitute a life. You can't do your activities of daily living. You
Mhm.
don't talk to anybody. People have different motivations. For me, because I have been in the health and wellness field my entire life, one of the motivators for me really came from research from Hope Edelman, who works with
Yes.
motherless daughters.
Yes, it's
Right.
an excellent book, yes.
Yeah, tremendous book. And one of the things I liked that she said is, that children often lose their parents when they lose a sibling. So it was great motivation for me with two other children and a husband,
Mhm.
married many, many years now, that it was motivating and it was inspirational for me to know that I wanted to still show up for them as
Mhm.
much as the mother I had always been, even when their brother was alive, and that I wouldn't lose myself.
Mhm.
And that was a benchmark for me to be able to say, how can I show up? And at the same time, let them have their own grief experience. I'm the kind, I go to resources, I go to books, I
Yeah.
go to all kinds of learning, which, not to compare, because that usually leads to the despair that people feel, but to just see, what else are people feeling? What else are people experiencing? Where are they? Where do they need help? I
Mhm.
worked with a woman recently that it took her 6 years for her to even look at a picture of her deceased son.
Mm.
And then she didn't even connect the dots. That, I don't know if this it was your experience, it was for me and for a lot of my clients, that grief will bring up old wounds.
Yes.
And in her case, it really did. It brought up a painful childhood.
Mhm.
And she never like connected how she was never modeled grief, how she, even when she had small losses, that they were really not attended to. They're basically, just brushed aside and we're supposed to move on and get
Mhm.
on with life. And I think that's changed today. I think people are more open and receptive to it. But I think that kind of ideology still hangs around. And a
Oh,
lot of
definitely.
people, yeah. So it was, and then she also learned that by sharing her story, that she could help others who are struggling, to like find meaning after loss.
Yeah, I mean, like, for me, seeing pictures of my mom s brings me comfort, but I know sometimes for some people, it doesn't, and something as simple or as silly as my mom loved the Peeps, the marshmallow Peeps, and she did, she loved them her whole life,
Do you
and
have a favorite color?
no, well, her favorite color was green, but she ate all of them. I always brought them. As a matter of fact, that was the last thing she ate was a Peep. Um,
Wow.
so so she died in January, so when they started to come out, for Easter, I, like, could not I had to, like, go a different aisle in any of the stores, like, I just wanted to start crying when I saw the Peeps. But now when I see them in the store, I smile and I buy them because I find comfort, and I feel like that's because my mom and I would buy them for her all the time,
Mhm,
so
mhm,
sometimes I understand where people are like, "I can't look at this picture right now." And I'm like, "Well, that's okay, you will at times." Another time you'll find comfort with it. But getting back to what you were talking about earlier too, like, I know a lot of people, they get so nervous. They're like, "Well, I don't know what to say. I just want to talk about something happy." And people would ask me, "Well, how are you?" And I'd be like, "I don't know. Like, I have no idea how I am." Like,
right.
uh, you know.
Right. I mean, I think, yeah, and that's something which actually did propel me a lot into doing this professionally, is because, especially around my son's death, people really didn't know what to say.
Mhm.
And a lot of people like, oh, it's the worst loss and all this. And like, just saying something as simple as, I am so sorry for your loss.
Mhm.
I wish I had the right words. Just know I care. I don't know how you feel, but I'm here to help in any way I can. You'll be in my thoughts and prayers. Whatever is really resonates with you. Sometimes just again that invitation is like, may I just give you a hug? Would a hug help you?
Mhm.
And you get a yes or a no, and you do exactly what that person needs in that moment. But the things we never want to hear, at least she lived a long life.
Yes. She's not
Many
suffering
people don't.
anymore. Yeah.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And there is some relief for somebody who has suffered
Yes.
for a long time, and sometimes the people who left behind after that loss may feel guilt or shame for feeling any relief. But it doesn't help for somebody to kind of hand that kind of platitude to you, the whole he or she's in a better place, the
Mhm.
reason for everything, you know, um
Yeah, because you wanna be like, "I get that, I understand that, but they're still not here." So
yeah, exactly.
yeah.
I heard one woman say to me that I work with, she said, "If one more person tells me, 'You're so strong,'
Yes.
she said,
Yes.
I think I'm gonna punch him."
Yeah.
She said, "Because this is the no choice option. I don't
Uh-huh.
get to decide. I mean, just because you don't see me crumpled, covered in my bed with my blanket over my head,
Mhm.
doesn't mean I don't feel that way sometimes."
Right, exactly.
And I think people really project onto you because they're really struggling. They have the best intentions
Mhm.
to support you, but because we don't talk about grief, uh,
Mhm.
and the fact is, mm, if you don't live a long life, it's about the only way you're not going to experience loss or
Yeah.
grief. If you live long enough, it will be a part of it. And what I have found, and I'm curious, because you are obviously connecting with so many people. I mean, I have met some of the most amazing people because of my grief experience.
Yes. Yeah. And I had a couple of friends because my mom went into hospice, and, I I can't say enough about hospice services. They are just wonderful, and it's
They are.
not just the services for the patient, but for the caregivers and the family. And
Oh, it's everything.
I did individual grief counseling. Plus, they have a lot of events and group counseling. And I've had some friends, and I tell them, I'm like, I'm telling you, I advise you to do this because I go, when you walk in a room and you realize that you're not alone, that even though, it's a different person that someone's grieving, it's a different circumstance, they truly understand how you're feeling and you just don't feel so alone. You feel that
Mhm.
connection that, wow. And I remember the one time they call it Lights of Love, the hospice that's here. And it's at Christmas time and it's just this beautiful ceremony. And I was so overwhelmed by like, here's this room full of people and everyone in this room experienced loss. And
Mhm.
it's so overwhelming, and yet it was comforting because I didn't feel so alone knowing I was missing my mom. All these people were missing others, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it can really be an amazing shift just in your perspective and how you approach people. There's so much good news about how those kinds of experiences and healing comes through connection.
Yes.
That's really the key to that's why support, whether it's in a group like that or whether you seek a professional. I
Mhm.
mean, there's so many platforms at this time if you want to. That's one of the things that I feel really compelled to do with people who I interact with is make sure they have resources that they could choose. For me, as I mentioned earlier, reading was a huge
Mhm.
resource for me, but it wasn't for my husband.
Yes.
So it's interesting. We grieve differently, and it was very helpful for me to learn those things um, and share them with people who wanted that kind of approach as well. And then, when you are in a grief counselor or a grief educator, the student and the teacher are one.
Mhm.
The griever really directs where we go in the conversation and what they're ready to share and to experience. And there are wonderful exercises and things that we do, but it's all based on what they're prepared to do, where they want to put their focus. Not it's not like signing up, to the gym and you know
Right.
getting a plan in place. That's not what it's about. But to your point, having people who understand your loss
Mhm.
and who can show up with the right amount of compassion and understanding, can witness your grief, and can just be there for you to help you get through your days. And there are some really great things that people can do with support that they maybe wouldn't choose to do on their own,
Mhm.
So
And as you were saying about different things that people say, I'm reminded, like, the night before my mom died, a really good friend of mine called me, and I always remember he was just like, there are no words for me to say how you're feeling, but, like, basically, I'm here. He's like, I don't completely know what you're feeling, even though he has lost his dad. But for him, it was like his dad died of cancer. My mom was dying of dementia. So, like, it's different things. But yet, that meant so much to me because it was just like, yeah, there are no words. But yet, by you saying that, I felt comforted, instead of all those other
well, he
cliches.
connected with you
Yeah.
through his warmth and his care and his
Yes.
understanding how difficult it was. That's what I try to share with people as well.
Mhm.
You don't have to have the perfect words. I mean,
Yes.
better to avoid some of those things we mentioned
Yeah.
earlier that don't help. But putting that aside, any demonstration
Mhm.
of care and concern. I mean, I have a friend who still till today, just out of the blue, will send me a heart emoji.
Mhm.
I will often, for people, whether they're personal and professional relationships, I'll just often send a text message and just say, that I am thinking about them, that I'm here. No need to reply. Just want you to know
Mhm.
that I'm here. And I've gotten a lot of positive feedback, like you said, from your friend. It's
Mhm.
like they're not going to fix anything because you're not broken.
Right.
They can't say anything that's really going to take your pain away, but they can be in communion with you around your discomfort, your ache, all those things, the pain that you feel, and even things that you want to celebrate. Because sometimes people feel really awkward
Mhm.
about after someone dies, smiling, laughing,
Yeah.
doing anything that seems remotely like, you're not paying homage to, the person who died. And that's particularly true with children.
Yeah.
Children are often the forgotten grievers, especially when they're
Mhm.
really young,
Yeah.
but they need honest support as well. I did listen to one of your stories that where a woman was talking about how she didn't learn till late in life
Mhm.
that her father did not die from heart disease. He died from taking his own life,
Yes.
and how disruptive that is when you're not being honest.
Mhm.
It does help to get languaging around that so that it's age appropriate,
Yeah.
but, eventually you're going to find out.
Mhm.
And, that honesty around it, like, "I don't know what your pain is," like your friend said to you. Oh my god, it's so genuine, it's so comforting,
Mhm.
and you get that. That comes through. So who is it? Was it Maya Angelou who said, "People won't remember what you say, but they'll remember how you made you feel."
Yeah, I think so,
Um,
yeah. Yeah.
I think so, and that's a perfect your example is a perfect example of that.
Yeah, and, it's so simple, but yet it's so hard for so many people, to
Mm,
just be like sometimes I'll tell people, "Oh," some people like to read, I like to read too, but then sometimes I'll be like, "Hey, there's this great movie or there's this show," like, if that's where you find comfort in, like,
mhm,
I'll say, "For me, this is this movie I really just I connect it with," or things like
mhm.
that, and it helps, for some people,
It
that's
does.
what they
I think
need.
what's interesting is, the research shows, or at least, it could just be anecdotal, that when people are really grieving and sad, they don't necessarily wanna watch a movie that cheers them up. They
Yes.
wanna watch a movie that helps them just appreciate that experience,
Mhm.
and for a lot of people, it's a safe place
Mhm.
to cry and to let those feelings come forward, but to your point, it's really so individual.
Mhm.
I mean, and you could feel one moment you wanna do that, and the next moment you wanna do something completely different, and that's all okay. It's all
Mhm.
okay,
Or
you
I
know?
was just talking to a friend of mine, and we were both saying that sometimes you find comfort in watching these old shows. Maybe it's Friends reruns because you know what the lines
Mhm,
are going to be and they make you laugh, and that's what you need. And that's
mhm,
okay if you're spending your time watching, these reruns, if that's where you find comfort. That's what you
mhm.
need, or maybe it's somebody's favorite show, your loved one's favorite show that
Exactly.
yeah, like my mom loved Murder, She Wrote, so sometimes I'm over there and I'm like, and I know all of I've seen them all, like, but I'm like, "Oh, I'm still watching it," It's just what
Well,
it
but
is.
it's comforting to you, and
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
and it's connecting. It connects you to her and the things that she loved, and it makes you feel close, and
yeah,
that's great.
and I think that
Yeah.
people need to know that it's okay to do that if you find comfort in that, that's okay. I do wanna
Well,
make
that's just it. It's just when we get to the point where we're judging,
yeah,
our own behavior and other people's behavior, where it becomes more difficult to see how we can live with the grief. When you just stay curious,
mhm,
and you find resources like this, and where people can have a conversation about it, and really let you know that all of that is within the experience that people have of the things that help and what doesn't help.
I do wanna talk about your website. It's Jane K. Dye, and it's DYE.com, correct?
Yes.
And I
That's
did
right.
notice because you do have a background, in nutrition and stuff, with it, I find that some people, like, they resort to comfort food during grief, and then some people can't eat at all. What would you say, like, how's that correlation with nutrition, like, being holistic to help? Because people think, "Oh," like you said, "You're grieving, you're crying," but your whole body's going through it.
Absolutely. In fact, one of the best resources that talks about that is Mary Frances O'Connor, who's done the grieving brain and the grieving
Yes.
body, actually, yeah, talks about that biological response to grief.
Yes.
What I suggest to people is, you have to stay hydrated,
Mhm.
even if it's just little bits here and there. I mean, comfort food is fine, but it just depends whether or not your digestion feels well. I mean, I think even more than focusing on, what we eat or don't eat, it's to be able to move your emotions through the body. So whether that's taking a walk, or if you're somebody who likes, to stretch or do yoga or meditation, we do need to move the body, can help mobilize the emotions. I happen to be a real fan of Paul Deniston, who does grief-yoga.com. I just finished one of his programs, but
Mhm.
there were times where even in my certification um, education that I did Paul's yoga, and I thought like, yeah, I'm like, doing fine
Mhm.
here. And then I did the exercise and I had such an emotional download that was so healing.
Mhm.
Very much like what you talked about with your friend, but it's like I wasn't really expressing those emotions, and until I expressed them through an embodied experience like yoga
Mhm.
or walking, I couldn't mobilize them the same way. I think that in all things, when we talk about health and wellness and we want to talk about diet and lifestyle, it's really about eating nutrient dense foods that you like, being able to enjoy the eating process when you feel up to eating, not forcing yourself if you don't want to, but just staying hydrated. If somebody's really having tremendous difficulty, like eating it all, you might want to do some broths, some soups, things like that, that feel nourishing. But hey, if that chocolate chip cookie like makes you
Mhm.
remember mom in a way, I mean, I was working with a woman who she had just lost her aunt, and Christmas was coming up, and she's like, we used to spend that holiday together. So, well, what was something special that you shared? She goes, oh, her French toast.
Mm.
So I said, would it be comforting for you to make and eat French toast that you would have had with her? She said, you know what, I just think it might. So, I mean, nobody's going to call French toast a health food.
Yeah,
But,
but
but
still.
it's the pleasurable experience of enjoying what, you just enjoy as a solo person, but or what you might have shared.
Mhm.
And I think that that's a good guidance in the beginning, especially as you said, early on. Grief is a very different experience to when we get to the second and the third year. And
Mhm.
you can call it more mature grief. Um, I think that does that answer your question?
Yes, yeah, because I know
Yeah,
people
yeah.
are like, that is something that "Did you eat?" And sometimes you're like, sometimes you forget, or sometimes you're like, "I don't know,"
Mhm.
or you're like, "Well, yeah, but and it is
Yeah,
important, and I have to tell myself that too, like, do whatever it is that you like to do to move because it does help.
right. And what
Yeah,
what any what any person would still advise is, if you're going to pick something that's not pick fruits, vegetables, things that are not processed only. I wouldn't
yes,
advise anybody that, even if chip and dip was your thing with your loved one, maybe to make that the only thing you eat, and then you listen to your body, right?
mhm.
Certain things are going to feel okay and certain things aren't, but be gentle with yourself.
And also you offer services on the website. People can go on there for different counseling and things like that on your
Yeah, the
website?
first thing I offer for everyone is a free initial consultation.
Okay.
I want you to get to know me. I want to get to know you, and we can decide together what is your next best move. And if you want one to one counseling, we can certainly do that. But I will supply people with resources and other things that might, if one to one isn't what they want to do, I will supply them with a lot of resources so they can take their time. It's not something to be rushed. People have to feel they're ready. Um, and when they are, I'm thrilled to say that people have great experiences with support, guidance, and accountability. And the accountability is only just showing up. That's all. It's not, they're no, you don't have to jump through any hoops or do
Yeah.
anything fancy.
Well, thank you
But
so much for joining us today. This has been very, very informative. And again, I'll have your website link on with the show. So it's
great.
Jane K. Dye, and Dye is DYE.com. So people can check all of that out as well for it.
So I'll leave you with this last thought. A
Sure.
friend of mine who's also a nurse says, "Do you realize that as a grief educator, your name is Jane Dye?" And I said, "Yes, but it's not spelled that
Well,
way." So
I
I
don't
don't know
know
if that
if you ever watched the show Touched by an Angel years ago. It was on.
I did in the past,
And
yeah.
and the actor that played the angel, quote unquote, of death, his last name was Dye too. That's spelled
Yeah, John
exactly the
Dye,
same.
right?
Yes, yes,
Yes.
yeah. So it's a
So
it's a full circle type of a thing. So that's
it is
okay.
a
Yeah. So
thing. I appreciate your sense of humor around it.
yeah. So, but thank you so much for joining us today. So hopefully everyone has learned of it. So if you enjoyed your cup of tea, your cup of coffee, or your glass of wine, if it was a really bad day, type of a thing, and you will join us and you found some comfort and join us for another edition of Patty's Place.